Can a single decision mark the end of a complete dynasty in Formula One? On July 9th, Red Bull Racing not only fired Christian Horner, he also let two of his key figures out on the same day. What really happened behind the scenes and why this day could be the beginning of the end for the Red Bulls? On July 9, 2025, Formula One witnessed an unprecedented institutional earthquake. The Red Bull Racing team, a symbol of hegemony in the modern era of the championship, announced the immediate dismissal of Christian Horner, its team director for 20 years. More than a managerial change, this event represented the definitive implosion of a structure that had sustained one of the most successful projects in the recent history of motoring. Horner was not just one more leader, he was the architect of a dynasty, a man who, since 2005, molded every aspect of the identity of Red Bull, from the internal culture of the team to his public image, from the technical signings to the work philosophy that led him to conquer 8 championships of pilots and 6 of builders. His figure was intrinsically linked to Red Bull DNA. Since the start of his management, Horner was much more than a sports director. It was the visible face, the authorized voice, and the political power of the organization within the paddock. At each FIA meeting, in each media scandal, in each technical controversy, he was the one who gave his face, not only for loyalty but for control. For 2 decades, it was the one who kept a complex team cohesive and full of egos, both on the track and in the offices. Under his command, Red Bull not only became a reference of technical performance, but also a force of influence that transformed political dynamics within the Great Circus. The team was in 4th position of the Constructors' Championship with 172 points, a ridiculous figure compared to the 460 that McLaren had in front. It was his worst performance since 2009. That year, casually, it was also a turning point but in the opposite direction, the beginning of his rise to absolute domain. Now 2025 became its tragic back. The metaphor cannot be clearer. That team that for years intimidated with its technological and tactical superiority was now a staggering giant, caught in its own contradictions. This dismissal was not planned as part of a serene transition. He was abrupt, executed in the middle of the season, without notice and with implications that came immediately. It was a surgical maneuver, yes, but also desperate. There were no emotional thanks or symbolic ceremonies. Communication was cold, technical, corporate. A brief statement that reported on the immediate exit of the man who represented the soul of the team. A sentence executed without the possibility of appeal, at the most fragile moment, and with the media pressure at its highest point. This was not a simple goodbye. It was a statement of internal war. And the most disturbing? We still didn't know who would really take control of the helm. The storm unleashed by Christian Horner's departure did not stop there. As if it were a dominoes falling into a carefully placed chain, that same day, 2 of the most influential figures in the executive structure of Red Bull also abandoned the organization. Paul Smith, Group's Communications Director, and Oliver Hughes, Global Marketing Director. These outputs were not isolated movements or simple collateral consequences of Horner's dismissal. On the contrary, they were part of a meticulously designed internal operation to completely dismantle the former guard that had sustained the team for more than a decade and a half. It was a total purge. A drastic and immediate cut with everything that represented the Horner era. Paul Smith was more than a press chief. It was the strategic shadow behind each public word that came out of the team. A teacher of the institutional narrative who for years knew how to shape the perception of Red Bull before the media, even in the midst of explosive crises such as Abu Dhabi 2021, the budget roof scandal in 2022, or the political battles with Mercedes and Ferrari. He was an expert in turning off fires before they became uncontrollable, and his proximity to Horner was absolute. His loyalty was not just professional, he was personal. Dismissing it was not a technical decision. It was a symbolic execution. Red Bull not only removed a communicator, he erased one of the last guardians of the official story that sustained his authority before the outside world. Oliver Hughes, meanwhile, was the architect of Red Bull's global positioning as a brand. Under its supervision, the team ceased to be just an F1 team and became an entertainment, lifestyle, and pop culture platform. His firm was behind global marketing campaigns, collaborations with external brands, and expansion strategies in key markets such as Asia and Latin America. Hughes was the one who went up to the podium when Verstappen won in Miami, who designed the events around the big prizes, who wove the network of commercial relations that fed the team from outside the paddock. His immediate departure broke not only a leadership line, but the direct connection with many of the key sponsors. Both were sent to gardening leave, a paid output period without access to internal resources or confidential information. This measure, although common in F1 to protect commercial secrets and institutional relations, takes a completely different meaning in this context. Smith and Hughes were not retiring with honors. They were being controlled in a controlled, preventive way, almost as if they were an internal risk. It was the equivalent of closing a vault and throwing the key to the bottom of the sea. Red Bull was eliminating any vestige of loyalty to the old regime, confirming that the crisis was not only of results, it was a war of power. The most revealing of these exits is their simultaneity. There is no way that they have been chance. That the three figures more closely linked to the Horner nucleus will leave the team the same day can only mean one thing. Someone in the Red Bull Dome decided that it was time to close a cycle. The investigation, carried out privately and with the participation of independent lawyers, extended for 8 continuous hours. It was carried out in a secret location, far from the paddock, to avoid media attention. But the effort to keep it hidden was useless. Weeks later, screen catches, documents and even alleged conversations were leaked through a public link of Google Drive. Horner's credibility, until then armored, was exposed to public trial. Although it was officially acquitted due to lack of conclusive evidence, the damage was irreversible. The confidence within the team was eroded, the relationships tensed, and the leadership began to be questioned from the inside, even those who until then had been loyal. The simultaneous exit of Christian Horner, Paul Smith and Oliver Hughes did not simply leave vacancies in the Red Bull structure. It generated a void of power that, until now, no one has been able to fill with authority. In a sport such as Formula One, where every thousandth of second matters and each decision has strategic and economic implications, losing 3 of the most veteran pillars of the team is not just an organizational setback. It is an operational catastrophe. The team was drifting, without a compass, without clear leadership, and with a deeply divided internal environment. The repercussions of this structural tinder manifested themselves with a chilling speed. The first consequences were seen on the track and soon arrived. The RB21, which was born with championship ambitions, began to show unexpected mechanical weaknesses. Reliability problems, lack of balance in technical circuits, and an erratic adaptation to temperature changes were only some of the symptoms of a development that, without a firm technical and political direction, began to stagnate. In simple words, the car stopped evolving. Without Horner making decisions, without Smith containing the media fire, and without Hughes managing the institutional projection, Red Bull entered a state of total confusion. The pressure was immediately moved to the Max Verstappen environment. The defending champion, known for his extreme demand and his null tolerance to mediocrity, began to express his frustration in private and later in public interviews. His confidence in the team's direction broke. Jos Verstappen, always at the center of power, made it clear that Max was not tied to any color or contract if the project ceased to be competitive. The statements were direct. As long as you have a car to win, everything will be fine. If not, you will have to make decisions. In practice, this was a veiled threat of rupture. And Red Bull understood it perfectly. This distrust environment not only affected the technical development of the car, it extended as a virus by all levels of the organization. Some engineers began sending curriculum to other teams. Paddock staff began to rotate unexpectedly. Executive meetings, formerly coordinated with Swiss precision, became chaotic, full of contradictions, reproaches, and incompatible visions. No one knew who had the last word. The internal culture, which for years had been an efficient mixture of creative aggressiveness and centralized management, was completely fragmented. What was left was no longer a team, but a series of disconnected departments, trying to save their part of the ship while it sank. At this point, can this team survive the collapse of your leadership? The dismissal of Christian Horner, along with the simultaneous exits of Paul Smith and Oliver Hughes, has left Red Bull racing to the edge of a forced reconstruction, without a defined structure or a clear road map. It is not a simple change of names or an organizational rearrangement. What we are witnessing is the end of a management model that, for 2 decades, was the very basis of team success. And the situation is aggravated with every weekend. McLaren, Ferrari, and Mercedes are no longer just direct competitors. Now they are examples of stability, of efficient management, of long-term vision. McLaren leads the championship with authority, demonstrating that he learned from the mistakes of the past. Ferrari, with the incorporation of Lewis Hamilton and a consolidated technical team, projects a serious resurgence. Mercedes, even in the midst of its own restructuring, shows signs of tactical coherence. Meanwhile, Red Bull seems to be stopped over time, waiting for a solution that does not finish arriving. In this context, the role of Max Verstappen is crucial. He is the only figure that still has the ability to keep the team together. Its presence, its performance, its status as multiple world champion, function as a kind of emotional anchor for a structure that falls apart. But even that stability has a limit. Verstappen has made it clear that its loyalty is not unconditional. If you do not perceive a firm commitment of the team towards excellence, if you are not guaranteed a winning car, the threat of your departure will cease to be a remote possibility to become a specific decision. And if Red Bull loses Max, loses everything. So, can Red Bull survive this cataclysm? The answer is not simple. Yes, it has resources. Yes, he has young talent. And yes, it has a global brand that is still powerful. But all that will be irrelevant if they fail to rebuild an internal culture that works. One that does not depend on a single person, but that does not work as a void of power where no one dares to make decisions. The key is not just to find a new team director, but in redefining what Red Bull wants to be in this new stage. A permanent contender? An entertainment brand? A transition team?